Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Awake Swedish Whiskey Girl, and today we're here with the world's #1 bourbon, Jim Beam. And this is the Jim Beam Black Extra Aged. It sits at 43% ABV and it's made in Kentucky. Because it is a bourbon, it is of course made with at least 51% corn and has been matured on fresh American white oak casks. The Jim Beam brand is of course a very popular one, and they do a lot of different whiskies. So it's gonna be curious to try this one here. And of course, especially since they have such a long heritage, I believe they turn 225 this year. So yeah, it's a long time to have been going with America's native spirits. But let's start by having a look on the nose. Smells very kind of a bit like stepping in to a barn where it's really dry. This is kind of fresh, or sometimes when you go into the stables and it just smells of really fresh hay and kind of cereal notes in the air, and it's very dry, has to be like a summer's day, hasn't rained for ages, that kind of dry malty notes. Oaky, but the oak has a slight sweetness to it. It's always interesting because I don't tend to drink or try as many bourbons. It's always very, very different to me, and it's almost tricky to say that it smells like a bourbon, because that of course it is a bourbon, so that makes sense. But I never say that a Scotch whiskey smells like a Scotch, even though it does of course smell like whiskey. There's definitely a sweet note in there. I'm just trying to figure out what that sweetness is. Because it is surrounded by like really dry, fresh wood and that like hay, stables hay note. It's like a honey sweetness with that cerealness. But really interesting notes and very kind of course very different to what I'm used to most of the time, but hopefully I'll be able to try more and more bourbons and build up a better nose and palate for it. Yeah, but I would say things I get the most is that kind of stables hay note with that fresh dry wood and like a honey sweetness. A little bit with like corn sweetness as well, of course. But let's have a taste. Cheers. Easygoing. It leaves this tanniny oakiness. And the finish is very pleasant. It's also that kind of dry woodiness, but the tannins are definitely there, and they go a little bit sharper for a bit, and then it kind of softens out, and you're left with this lingering bourbon sensation where you have a bit of that really charry initial oakiness, and then there's also that sweetness, which now feels more like corn sweetness. I'm really enjoying this finish. I just want to sit with it for a bit. I mean, if you love a charry kind of oaky influence, then you'll love the finish on this one. The nose has something that's so weird as well. I wish I could describe that weirdness. It's a little bit metallic in a way. If you could smell metal, it's like, I think one of the reasons it also makes me think of stables is they sometimes have these old tools that might not necessarily be used anymore, but say you have really old tools that are made of like different types of metals, and they're almost a little bit rusty, and you get that kind of, you can almost get the scent of them in the air along with that hay notes. That's definitely like why it makes me think of stables specifically. yeah. I mean, I can see why so many people like it. It's so welcoming, especially if you're coming from, I think, Scotch into bourbon. This is so different, but I think it's more different on the nose than it is on the palate. Because on the palate, it does, of course, have this kind of bourbon flavour to it, but it's also very oak influenced. So you get the tannins, but you also, at the same time as you get a kind of drying tannin sensation that leaves your tongue feeling slightly rough, it's still very easygoing and smooth. And then the sweetness is there, the corn sweetness is there, and just kind of assists the other flavours and just rounding them out a bit. I was expecting it to be slightly sharper, but it's more oaky than I was expecting, more smooth and oaky. I know it says smooth, probably here on the bottle somewhere, but it's easygoing, and if you want something that's easy to approach, really nice. It is, of course, because it is so welcoming and friendly, it's, if you added a mixer to it, for example, I could see it disappearing a little bit, just leaving that kind of initial oaky sweetness on top. Yeah, I mean, so I can definitely see why it's so popular, because it is fairly easy to kind of drown it out. But I could also see that if you just want to drink it neat and want something that's quite approachable, then, I mean, it works for that as well. Sometimes, or at the moment at least, I like adding tonic to both whiskey and rum. So I like when a bit of the character of the whiskey is still shining through, so I can kind of get that with a specific whiskey that I've added, or to really appreciate the whiskey but through the tonic. Does that make sense? But I feel like, I mean, I need to try it, don't knock it until I tried it, but I think it would disappear a little bit too quickly if you prefer drinking it with a mixer. And this nose I'm going to sit with forever because it's fascinating. It does have a slight vegetal bitterness, which belongs to kind of the oakiness of it. And the sweetness is kind of corn, but also honey sweetness. It has a bit, of course, of soft vanilla flavours, but I wouldn't say they're the most outstanding. And this is what I like with visiting something that is generally considered to be like a very big brand that maybe a lot of people would have in Coke. But it's like revisiting something like Jameson's, or like a Johnnie Walker Red, or your Glenlivet, or your Glenfiddich. If you haven't tried them in a bit and you just sit with them and really, really taste them and really, really experience them. I mean, they are popular for a reason, and I can really see why this is popular, because it's friendly, but it's tasty. Friendly and tasty. Put that on a bottle, perhaps. Almost a bit like when you were little and you played with clay. A little bit of that as well. So put that clay on the floor of a stables. Yeah. And of course I mean stables without the influence of smelling perhaps horses. It's just that kind of abandoned stables with clay and rusty metallic things. Maybe. I would of course love to hear what you think of Jim Beam Black. Have you tried this one, or have you perhaps tried another Jim Beam? I'd love to hear your recommendations, of course, for bourbons. I have so many recommendations for American whiskey and bourbon, and I can't wait to research more and see if I can maybe get my hands on them eventually. One that I really want to try again is the Michter's, because I have had it before and I remember it as being really nice, but I haven't had it in maybe 2 years, so I really need to revisit that one. And of course, if you like what I'm doing here on YouTube and my other social channels, I would be absolutely over the moon if you consider using my affiliate links the next time you're shopping with the Whisky Exchange, Master of Malt, or the Scotch Malt Whisky Society. All the information is in the description here below, as well as links to my other channels, like my website, my Instagram, my Teespring shop, or my Patreon. As always, a massive thank you to my wonderful supporters on Patreon. Your support means so much. I hope you've all had an absolutely wonderful day. Slán Skål.